The next day, all four couriers agreed to travel to each station and demonstrate their skills to each other. Emerald began at the knife-throwing station, and she threw as many knives as she could at targets with a lot of accuracy, which impressed Icarus and Aurelia. Spectacle then used his sword to cut the hands and legs of numerous dummies off in a time period of barely a few seconds, which caused Icarus to yawn sarcastically. Spectacle scowled at Icarus before grabbing his sword and throwing it as far as he could. Icarus proceeded to throw spears under the guidance of Rubeus, and, in order to amuse his allies, threw a spear towards Shad's head, which caused him to squeal and fall into the aquatic tank, leading to the couriers jeering at him. Icarus gave Aurelia a brief nod, and she fired arrow after arrow at targets on the wall, and while she was very accurate, she was less so than Emerald, which caused Emerald to smirk. Icarus noticed this and whispered to Aurelia that he would let her kill Emerald if he got the chance. The tributes from 11 and 12 spent some time completing the obstacle course, and after 40 minutes all four of them had finished, which made the four of them move to the knife-throwing station. Syndicate appeared pathetic with even a weapon as basic as a knife, while Stretcher appeared restless and said that he wanted to show the group his sword-fighting skills. Carmack eventually agreed and the group moved to the sword-fighting station, in which Stretcher explained the basics of using a sword to Carmack and Peppa, while Syndicate muttered under her breath about how much she wanted to go home. After a bit, Stretcher asked Carmack and Peppa to wait for a few seconds, and he grabbed Syndicate, before telling her that all that would return home would be her body if she did not try her best to win the games. It is not known what Syndicate was thinking after this, although my father, who worked in the training center at the time, has told me that Syndicate appeared much more enthusiastic about training after this. The following afternoon, each tribute was given 15 minutes to demonstrate a chosen skill to the game makers, all during the assessment of tributes, in which they would be given a training score. Spectacle and Emerald were both called first to demonstrate their skills, and although it is unknown what they did, they both scored a respectable 9. Icarus was called next, and he demonstrated his sword fighting skills, pain resistance, and some of his super endurance by running around the room at extreme speeds without stopping. He then put a snake in his mouth, and whilst Game Maker friend told him to stop, Icarus did not appear to feel anything, which showed some of his poison endurance. As Game Maker friend was telling him to leave, Icarus suddenly placed several wires onto his body and switched the current on, and whilst he could be seen gritting his teeth, he managed to stay still for about 5 minutes before screaming. The game makers were so impressed by Icarus's displays of endurance that they gave him an exemplary score of 13. Aurelia, on the other hand, displayed her skills with a bow and arrow, and she threw several knives, before making a smiley face with her arrows and knives. Aurelia ultimately scored an 11, which made her and Icarus the top scorers for this year. When these scores were announced on television, Rubeus embraced Icarus, who was triumphantly cheering, whilst nodding at Aurelia. Meanwhile, Stretcher did not really know what to do, and so he simply grabbed medicine balls and threw them as far as he could, before using a sword and breaking it into pieces with his muscular arms. This ultimately earned him a score of 8, due to him strutting out before being dismissed. As for Syndicate, she had plenty of experience with rocks from surveying the safety of the mines, and so she tried to lift up a rock, although she accidentally dropped it on her toe and swore. This annoyed the game makers and Syndicate, and she decided to list all the characteristics of a rock, which gave her a score of 4. The remaining scores ranged from 11 to 2, with Tab from 3 and Carmack both scoring 11, whilst Tobe from 10 and Samsonite and Solara both from 5 scored a 2. The next night the interviews took place, and Priscilla Price was dressed in a dazzling red gown with flowing fabric coming from underneath her arms. The first interview belonged to Emerald, and Mirai Kobayashi could be seen shaking her head as it became clear Emerald was coming off as extremely arrogant and conceited. When Emerald pointed a finger at Priscilla and said, "I'm much prettier than you," Mirai scowled and could be seen shouting at Emerald when her interview ended. Spectacle acted rather arrogant as well, although unlike Emerald, he praised the capital and told several young ladies he would bring them gifts during his victory tour, which caused some of them to faint from the shock. Spectacle left the stage to a standing ovation, and Priscilla called out Aurelia's name. Priscilla asked Aurelia what she thought of the capital, and Aurelia stared intently at her for a few moments, before saying that she found the capital fascinating, and that she would consider moving there after she won. Priscilla examined her before saying she liked her confidence, which made Aurelia curtsy. Before she left, Priscilla asked her if she liked a boy back home, and her eyes pierced the cameras for a few seconds before she laughed and said, "Maybe," mischievously, which caused the audience to cheer. Icarus was immediately greeted with a standing ovation, and almost all the members in the crowd exclaiming, "It's the Dalton boy!" Priscilla wasted no time in asking Icarus how he felt about being a capital boy in the Hunger Games, although he calmly replied that he was concerned about if he could move into the victor's village in the districts or if the capital can construct a mansion near the opulent penthouse his family lived in, which saw sounds of laughter from Priscilla and the audience. Icarus said he was going to make his father proud and flexed his arms before kissing Priscilla on the cheek and rushing off the stage. As for Syndicate, she appeared very quiet and did not speak very much, yet she answered most of Priscilla's questions with monosyllables. When asked why she was so quiet, Syndicate swore and shouted that the audience that they had no idea how she was feeling. Priscilla laughed and told her to calm down, albeit whilst glancing at the guards, who were now raising their weapons. This caused jeers from the audience, with one young man shouting, "Classic District 12!" Syndicate growled and marched off the stage without being dismissed, which caused even more jeers from the audience. The penultimate interview was that of Stretcher, and he flexed his arms, which accidentally tore the teal shirt he was wearing, but fortunately for him, this caused the audience to laugh. He spent most of his interview informing Priscilla about his knowledge of anatomy and genetics, and how he hoped to win the games due to his intelligence, or something worth remembering, not due to his good looks and athletic build. Priscilla told him he would have a better chance of receiving sponsor gifts due to his good looks, and that he would have no problem winning a girl's heart back home. Stretcher laughed and said he did have a romantic interest in a pathologist back at the hospital, but she did not know about this and never would. He then shrugged before shouting out, "I'm talking about you, Vita," which caused the audience to laugh. The final interview was that of head game maker Elias Friend. Despite being one of the youngest head game makers ever, at the age of 19, Game Maker Friend appeared extremely confident and told Priscilla this year's games would take place in a standard arena, but would be amusing to watch. Priscilla examined Game Maker Friend for a moment, before whispering, "Indeed," and ending the interview. The next day, the tributes were taken to their individual holding rooms underneath the arena, where they were ordered to change into the long black pants, the light blue shirts, and the sport jackets of their district colors that were provided, before they were given time to speak with their mentors or stylists. Icarus was visited by Rubius, who embraced his cousin and told him that he would have made his father proud if he had been alive to see this. Icarus gulped and Rubius helped him put on his jacket, before saying he looked as handsome as ever. Rubius then placed a hand on Icarus's shoulder and told him that his goal was to kill at least 5 tributes, and to betray Spectacle and Emerald as soon as the second or third day of the games. He then led him into his tube and smiled at him, and Icarus gazed ecstatically at him. Rubius then quickly rushed to visit Aurelia, who was a little forlorn about going into the games. Rubius assured her that he wanted to win just as much as he wanted Icarus to win, although Aurelia lowered her gaze and told him to stop lying. Rubius laughed and said, "You'll see," before placing her golden jacket on her and saying, "You and Icarus will make District 2 proud," and leading her into her tube. As for Stretcher, Gale appeared extremely annoyed that his tribute had to go into the arena, although he quickly asked Stretcher what activating agent was needed to trigger the genetic switch in the bread. Stretcher muttered something into Gale's ear, and Gale nodded, before patting him on the back and wishing him the best of luck in leading him into this tube. Syndicate was in tears when Rue came to visit her and had to embrace her mentor to stop crying. Rue told her she had felt the same way as Syndicate before the 98 Hunger Games, although this was indeed a lie. Syndicate appeared to realize this, yet she did not say anything and continued hugging Rue. Rue gave her some final bits of advice before sending Syndicate into her tube, and seconds later, her tube rose into the arena.